Hey guys, it's Barrett. Welcome back to the Gimme Camper. So today we are in for a treat because I have done something that's just breathtaking to us nerdy camper guys. So, you know, everybody's got a Blackstone Griddle. I drink the Kool-Aid. You don't have to have one. If you like to cook outside and you like a griddle, you can plug in an electric griddle wherever you go, and that's pretty cheap. But I just like the convenience. I like the Blackstones. Sadly, I've had about 4. So I started off with the 17-inch, which in my opinion is great for camping. So don't get me wrong there. Because up till now, what I've done with the outdoor kitchen here, it came with a capital grill that was in a drawer slide. It just pulled out. It did have a hard cover on top of it where it all folded down, kind of like an old Coleman stove. And I would just keep the 17-inch griddle up here on the counter, and I'd pull it down and set it on the capital grill, and we just use that whenever we wanted to. I did like the capital grill as far as the functionality. I do like grilled foods over the griddled food sometimes, certain things. I just like them better. That's a preference. Everybody has one, right? For me, the problem with this is that capital grill, it was all stainless. It got to where it was just real hard to keep clean, and I just got tired of fooling with it. And I decided I can get more counter space and stuff if I just put the griddle inside of the camper. Just install it right there. Boom, done. So after I had that 17-inch griddle, we liked it so much after our first camping trip that we got a 28-inch griddle for the house. And then whenever I built the new outdoor kitchen, I decided to splurge and get the 36 with the air fryers. Now, usually I'm the kind of guy that says, you know, all those upgraded models with the air fryers and the whatever. I'm usually say that that's just gimmicky stuff and it's just a waste of money. But I do really like the air fryer. I'm not sure how much it's actually worth as far as spending the money to get them, but I was kind of go big or go home when I built my deck. So here we are. The only size that I hadn't had up to this point is the 22. Now the 22, I had an itch when it came out, and I really wanted to go out and I wanted to grab one and I wanted to take it home with me and I want to take it camping. But the problem is whenever I went to Walmart and I saw one that was all set up, and they're nice, they got a hood, they got stands, legs that are adjustable, all that stuff. But the problem is I just felt like it lost a lot of that portability that I have with the 17-inch griddle. I get asked a lot of time, what's the best size griddle to take camping? The 17, 22, some people take the 36. This back ain't gonna take no 36 anywhere, I can tell you that. Especially the one with the air fryers, I could barely get it up on the deck. But after I was at the store model and I messed around with it and I saw it, now granted it does come into a few different parts to make it easier, but I felt personally like I'd lost a lot of the portability that I liked with the 17-inch, and it was a lot heavier. And truthfully, I felt like if you were going to move that around, then it was about just as easy to get the griddle top off of my 28-inch at home, pick it up, take it, put it in the truck, and fold the legs up and throw that in the back of the truck. And I really felt like that was about as easy. Now, truth is this is something that's going to be specific for everybody about what size they want to use. The problem that I had when I decided to install it in the camper here was 2 things. Number 1, do I want to buy another griddle? Because I've had every other size. And number 2, if I use that 17-inch, I'm going to have some extra space to the side of it. So I'm going to have to build a support there to put the drawer slide on. And after I do that, there's going to be like an extra little cubby hole. And my OCD didn't like having extra space. And so I started getting that itch again. So I did go out and I purchased the 22. I did get the Adventure Ready because it came with the hood and the legs. So I didn't have enough room for the hood where I was installing it. So it's basically trash, but I thought, you know, I can sell it, recoup some of my money. Nobody's wanted to buy it. But I put it on my Facebook marketplace. I thought maybe I'll recoup some of the money. Now what I really wanted was the legs. But why do I need the legs if I'm installing this in the camper? Well, I wanted the legs so they would go with the 17. Now, as far as cooking for people, I'll tell you, I've cooked for 15 to 20 people on a 17-inch griddle. And it's not a problem, but like when I make fajitas, everybody loves the fajitas when I make them. But when I make those on the 17-inch, basically I cook the vegetables and I take them off and I put them in a bowl. And then I cook the protein. And then after the protein's done, then I take the vegetables, I mix it back together, mix all that stuff up on the griddle. And it works okay. It just takes a little bit longer, but a 17-inch, you can cook for a lot of people. So don't let everybody says, oh, you need a 36-inch. You don't have to have a 36-inch even to cook for a lot of people. It is a lot easier, and it's a lot easier in the aspect of more griddle space, and you can control different temperatures. I'll give you that, but it can be done with a 17-inch. So the reason that I wanted it is because used to I would take my 28-inch whenever we would have like group camps, and because I got the 36-inch, I decided to give the 28-inch to a friend of mine, but the 28-inch did have a little bit of a warped griddle top. It's the only one that I've ever had a problem with. And by the way, that started right after I put 3 pounds of cold hamburger meat on there to brown it up. And so I guess it was the temperature difference. So you got to be careful with that stuff, but I'm not going to like preheat my meat to put on there because that's just gross. I'm not going to let that sit out for 8 hours. So anyway, that's where we are. So now that I don't have the 28 that I can take with me whenever we do group camps, I decided I'd like to have the 17. I'm going to keep the 17, and I got the 22 here. So you mix them together, and I got a little bit more than a 36-inch griddle, right? So the same stand, it works for the 17 and the 22, and that stand alone is about $100. And so it wasn't much more than the griddle by itself to get the Adventure Ready with the legs and the hood. I actually got like 10% off at Walmart because it took them 30 minutes to get somebody to move a pallet and get it for me. So I already saved a little bit of money. Maybe I can sell that hood and recoup the rest of it, and it's like getting a set of free legs. So as far as the actual install, it was pretty easy, I'll have to say. I thought that it was going to be worse because I thought that when I put this 22-inch in there, I thought I was going to have to widen the drawer slides a little bit. Even holding it up in front of the other grill, it looked like it was going to be a little bit too wide. But I'll tell you a secret, pretty much anything with a 23-inch wide hole there, a 22-inch is going to fit into with the drawer slides on the sides. Don't be like me and like try to check it too much and stretch the sides of it up, because it's going to work, okay? Just take my word for it. Now it would be better, I think, that if it was a little bit wider, because that way you could put some washers on the side for a spacer there. That's what Jared Gillis did on All About RVs whenever he did his install video a couple weeks ago. And that makes sense because it dissipates the heat and it doesn't go through that whole slide rail. But they don't seem to get too hot, and I wasn't going to move the sides of the cabinet if it was going to work where it was. I was having a little bit of an issue with it going in and out. It took a lot of force until I realized that it just seemed like the slides weren't lubricated. So I added some lubrication to the slides, and it's been terrific ever since then. All right, so I'm just going to walk you through the steps that I did to do this install. Now there's a couple of little things that I'm still tweaking on it, but this is the main meat and potatoes of how I did the whole thing. So the first step, obviously, is you got to remove that capital grill. So the easiest way to do that is when you pull it all the way out. If you've ever messed with drawer slides before, you know this, and I did, but it just didn't click until I started looking at it. But there's plastic release levers in those slide rails. All you got to do is move them side to side while you pull it out, and that whole grill just pulls right out. Then the next thing you're probably going to want to do, what I did, is clean that area up because there's a lot of grease and stuff that gets back in there. After that, and you kind of hold everything around and measure it up, you're going to notice that if you leave those slide rails in the same spot, it's going to hit right where the propane comes into the Blackstone griddle. Now, a lot of people feel differently about this. I hadn't really looked to see if this makes any sense by actually looking at the griddle, but a lot of people that I was asking for some advice on said they would have moved that gas fitting to the front of the griddle, but I don't really like that as aesthetically for me. I did have to trim the cabinet a little bit and we'll get there. But I got some ideas that I think is going to fix that up just right. However, if you did move the gas to the front, if that's possible, and it probably is, then you would probably want to do a 90-degree fitting right there, because you don't want that hose to stick out and like hit you in the belly while you're trying to cook. Make sense? After you get out the grill, what you're going to want to do is take the slide rails off. Those are held in place by some self-tapping screws. They're pretty long for what they're needed for, but you can use the same ones. I did for most of them. I did replace a couple of them. We'll get to that in a second. So after you take those screws out, you're going to have that end of the slide free. Then you're on to another step of the process. The next step, since the slide rail is going to run into where the gas line is on the griddle, is you're going to want to take the back portion of the slide rails off, the portion that's mounted to the cabinet. Still no big deal. 90-degree drill helps here a lot, but I just use a screwdriver. It's really not that bad. After you get those out, what you're going to want to do is figure out where in your space that you want to mount the griddle. I wanted to leave about a 1/2 inch of clearance at the bottom of the cabinet there. That way I didn't have any problems with it moving in and out. And it really helps like give you a handhold so you can grab underneath it and pull it out. The way that I did that myself is I made sure that the camper was level. And then I held the slide rail up after I marked a 1/2 inch from the bottom, just a mark on both sides. And I put one screw, I didn't have anybody hold it for me. I put one screw in the very front of that slide rail, and that held that into place. And then I got me a small torpedo level, put it in the middle of the slide rail so you could see if it was level or not. And then I was able to put a screw in the back portion of it. Worked out okay. You just have to remember to make sure your trailer is level first. After that, it's time to mount the slide rails to the Blackstone griddle. Now, obviously, whenever you're making holes in it, you're going to avoid any warranty that you have on it because you just put holes in it, right? So what we're going to do with this is we're going to use the same self-tapping screws. What I recommend is to get you a drill with a pilot hole. Don't be lazy like I was and just try to drill them in, because that was a pain. Now, since I wanted it a 1/2 inch up from the bottom of the cabinet, I decided just to mount the slide rail flush with the bottom of the Blackstone. Made it real easy, just set it on the counter. I actually set it on this counter. If you do that, you're also going to want to put a towel under there, because I did scratch my counter up. Don't you love how I can pass these tips on to you, which I knew I was doing it. To me, this is an outdoor kitchen. It's an outdoor workspace for me. And I don't mind if it gets grease splatter on it. I don't mind if it gets scratched up. I'm going to use this thing. I paid for it and I'm using it all the time. So the other thing to remember when you're putting those slide rails on is that the front of that griddle, you want it to be recessed a little bit, because those buttons on there, they're going to stick out a little bit further than the grill did. So what I did is I stuck those slide rails, I believe it's about 3/4 of an inch past the front of the griddle. I'm going to show you a picture of that here. And when I did that, it allowed it for the door to be able to shut whenever it comes down. Because if you don't leave those slide rails extended past the front of the griddle a little bit, it's not going to let that door close flush. The knob's gonna hold it out a little bit. One thing to keep in mind when you're putting those screws in that slide rail onto the Blackstone, anywhere in the back of it, you can look. I want you to make sure that there's nothing behind the metal where you're screwing it into. Visualize every one of them just to be on the safe side. But besides the first 2 or 3 inches in the front, there shouldn't be anything that you could possibly hit. But I want you to look under there. I want you to look up under the front before you put one right in the front, because that could hit your propane line on the side where the propane is, and possibly on the other side. I don't remember if there was anything up under there or not. But those 2 spots, I wanted to have a little bit extra support. And so I did put screws in the very front, but I used very short screws, not those that came with it, because you don't want to mess up your brand new griddle. After you did that, the magic is done. All you got to do is slide that puppy in there. Now, like I say, it may be a little bit tight at first. Don't be afraid, especially if you use the same slide rails that were on the grill, because grease drips down on there and gets junk in there, and of course dust, hits all that grease and kind of sticks in there. So don't be afraid if it's pretty sticky as far as taking a lot of pressure to move it in and out. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to lubricate those slide rails a lot, And in my case, hopefully in your case, but in my case, that freed it up. It's very smooth now with very little pressure to go in and out. So as far as the main installation, we're done. I'm going to do a couple of update videos. One is a heat shield that I put on the back. You know, I don't really think it was necessary myself. Obviously, I have to tell you there's safety risks by putting something that burns onto your camper. Okay, I'm not a professional. I'm just showing you what I did. No liability on me for what you do. But it's a pretty easy process. But I am going to tell you that I was afraid the countertop behind the griddle would get a little bit hot. And so I built a heat shield. And I did that by looking at a video that my friend Michael Bracewell made. And I'm going to link his video here. I'm going to have a separate video on how I made my particular heat shield. But it's with a piece of welding blanket cloth. And it seems to work pretty good, but truthfully, whenever I use it and that's not on there, I don't really see any difference. And so, depending on what you're doing, number one, it might be easier for you to use Michael's video, depending on how you're installing yours, because his heat shield was just flat, and mine has a curve built into it, which made it a lot more complicated. But it still wasn't too bad, as long as you don't mind using some rivets and some steel and drills and all that fun stuff. It really wasn't too bad. The next video that I'm going to have is I'm going to show you a little bit of the trim, fit, and finish that I'm going to work on, because there's two things that I'm not happy with. Number one is the notch that I made for the propane line to go back into, and I just made that real quick with a oscillating saw, and it worked, but it's fiberboard, and you know, that's not the most precise saw in the world, and so it did kind of chew it up a little bit. But I want to put some trim around that or something. And then the top piece behind the griddle, I plan on removing that from the cabinet. Now, I think that it's going to have plenty of support for no more than that cabinet supports that way. But to be on the safe side, I am going to reinforce it with a few pieces of angle iron, stuff like that. And that way, if I do that, then I don't have to take that griddle top off every time that I slide it in and out. And I think it'll work better for me. I will say that I've had other people that I've talked to that's done the same installation on very similar campers. I think one even was the same camper, and they didn't have any issues with the clearance there on the top and having to flip the griddle over. So that's going to depend a lot on your particular install. And I believe in my case, it's because I got the Adventure Ready model. I think that it's a little bit taller maybe than the standard griddle. I'm not sure about that, but I don't know how somebody else could install one in their camper, and mine has such less space left is for the sliding mechanism. So that's just one thing. You know, really it's not that big of a pain to flip the griddle top over every time, because used to, whenever I had the 17-inch, I'd flip it over and then I'd just set it on the counter. But hey, I'm lazy. I like to film 30-minute projects to share with you guys on things that you could do in 30 seconds and not have to do a project on, okay? I'll admit it. So that's our video of the Blackstone Griddle install. I hope this helps you out. Like I say, you know, I'm no expert. Use at your own risk, blah, blah, blah. But for us, this has been working out great. Till next time, we'll see you. Thanks for watching.
Do not forget to hit that subscribe button.